Well, hello everyone. As I said, my name is Jules. I'm a company based on apps in Sky. We do mobile apps and web apps. And Firebase, in general, is really important to us. How many people in the room here have heard of Firebase, use Firebase? You don't count on it because you work. So how many of you use it in your work? How many of you are familiar with it? Good, not very many people. So. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you about Firestore and cloud functions in particular. How many what's going on? That one. Okay, so what is Firebase? So a basic overview of Firebase is it's a cloud-based server system, for a better one word, that gives you loads of utilities and loads of power. For instance, you have Firestore, which is your database, cloud functions I'm going to talk to you about. There's machine learning. You can control the authentication for your apps or your web apps. You even have some hosting. You've also got sort of analytics side of things. So you've got Crashlytics. There's even a test lab, so you can upload apps and have it tested on various different devices. You also have lots of other things on the side. It's standard sort of Google Analytics for your website. This has moved across to Firebase. And there's lots of things there we can do. But like I say, I'm going to just give you a brief overview today about Firestore and the functions. Sorry? It is accessible. Like you can write APIs that can be accessible from HTTP requests, but the system is designed to be, because as I'll explain, Google have provided native APIs. So there's Java and Kotlin APIs for Android, you've got Swift APIs for iOS, and there's JavaScript and TypeScript APIs for the web apps. So it is mainly geared towards sort of app environment. Okay. So Cloud Firestore. What is Cloud Firestore? So basically, Firestore is a database, sits inside Google's cloud, and it's used to store all your sort of data, a bit like a SQL database. And it's really powerful. It's very flexible and scalable. Again, like I said, it's designed for web apps. There's also server development, so you've got the cloud functions I'll talk about in a minute. And there's also, like I showed at the beginning, that slide of all the functions you can get. There's loads of things you can do here with Firestore, but it sort of replaces your SQL database. And it also, Firestore is relatively new, and it's bringing some really good functionality. One of those really good parts is the offline support. So if your app, if you haven't got access to the internet for any reason, you can make changes to the data, and then when you do have connection to the internet, it'll sync it to the database for you, and it manages the timeline of that data, synchronizing it, make sure it doesn't override data that's newer than yours, and it does all that automatically. It's really, really good. So why should we use it? So it's a NoSQL database. That means that you don't have to write SQL queries like we would with MySQL or Microsoft SQL. It's all done in the code. So I'll show you an example in a bit after this, where you literally just get a reference to the collection, get a reference to the documents inside that, and you can just get access to the data in code. It's really quite simple. And the best things are that it's quick, and it's secure, and it's free. So free's got a bit of a star there. You can pay $25 a month, and you'll get more storage, you'll get more like queries to the database, more runs of the functions and things per month. And there's also, I'll show you the tiers of the different paying schemes in a minute. So is there any questions at this point about Firestore? Have I explained it well enough, basically what it is? Cool, okay. So here's an example of the Firebase console, for those of you who haven't seen it before. And this is just an example of the database that we'll be using in the little app example I've got in a minute for you guys. You can see here you've got the main collection on the left, that's sort of your higher level, it's a bit like a table in SQL if you guys are more familiar with that. And inside that, they call them documents. So the documents are what contains your data. So they can contain strings of characters, they can contain integers, Boolean values, and they can actually contain other documents. So you can nest your documents. You also have some other useful things up here, like you can set rules on the database. So instead of like Active Directory where you can say, well, this user is an administrator or this user is just a user. With Firebase, and there's lots of instances where we have rules like this, you can actually set up code. So you can actually have logic, depending on whether what data that user already has access to. You can control the feed where you can read and write to other parts of the database. It's really powerful. And then you've got some sort of usage statistics. You see the drop down at the top where it says Cloud Firestore. You can also select a thing called real-time database. And that was the version before this. It wasn't quite as powerful, but it did all the things this does. And the best thing about Firestore, in my opinion, is the real-time database side of things. So your app can say, okay, there's this particular collection and particular document that I'm interested in. It could be messages in this case. And instead of having to constantly query the database, are there new messages, are there new messages, Firebase will actually then just notify. There'll be an observable object, and Firebase will notify your app there's been a change, and here's the change. An example, I'll show you. I've got some code to show you in a bit. So does anybody have any more questions at this point? Yeah?
What's the difference between Firestore and real-time database?
So the real-time database is a bit older. This has been out, I think, this year. Firestore. And essentially, they've just improved upon the real-time database. So you can actually do more powerful queries from your code inside your app. You can do more filtering, more sort of ordering, sort of slightly more towards the SQL, the power you get with a script. Still slightly limited. Again, I'll talk to you about it in a minute when we get to the functions. It also, like I say, it's got the offline capabilities. They basically, instead of just trying to improve the real time, they've replaced it and made it better. Does that answer your questions? Any other questions?
I'm just trying to interpret what you just said. So with the new functionality allowed, it actually does a push?
Yeah, so the real time did do it, and that's what the real time is. So yeah, like I said, I'll show you some example code in a minute, but you literally just register almost like a listener to the database, and a callback will be fired within the API inside your code. So you pass it in a callback and say, when there's a change to the database, run this bit of code for me. So you can update your UI.
I have to have a socket open constantly, so I can't terminate the socket. I need to have that socket link established and permanently open.
I don't know about the very low level, like you're saying. I don't know how the very low level works, whether you've got a constant socket open or what. I'm not sure, but you're welcome to email and we can look deeper into it if you want, but I don't know about the lower level of that.
But in actually related to this, so is the code actually hosted there, or you have some webhook or some external? Yeah,
so inside your app, like I say, I'll show you an example code in a minute. You can actually, I've got a little app you can, or a web app that you can run on your phone, and we can see it running. I've got some code to show you. But yeah, the code runs in. It is your native code that's going to be triggered by this. Any other questions? So that's sort of an introduction to Firestore. I'm going to talk to you about cloud functions. So this is code in the cloud. So this is your own TypeScript or JavaScript code, which sits in the cloud and can be triggered or by different events, or it can be called upon directly with a HTTP request. So as I said, it's code that automatically runs in the cloud, and it responds to, there's three of, I think it's about 7 or 8 different triggers that it can respond to. So these are just the 3 I've used myself. So you can have a database trigger, which is what I'm talking about there. So you set up a reference to a document in the database, and when that changes, but you can also do it from a Firebase function. So you can, again, I've got some code I'm going to show you, and if somebody makes a change to a particular document, this code will run in the cloud, in Firebase cloud, and do an operation for you. It could sanitize data, it could could be, for instance, like you have a chat room or something. It could send a push notification to an app, or it could send an SMS. So HTTP request is another example. Literally, like an API, do a call to the URL that you get when you upload the function, and run that code like you would any sort of PHP script or any other kind of back-end script. And an analytics trigger, this is interesting because you can respond to events, like you have certain usages of the app, or you can even trigger it from Crashlytics. So if you have a report coming into Firebase that you've had a crash on your app, you could run a bit of script. It might record details into the database of the crash. It might send you an email. Although Firebase already does that for you, just trying to think of ideas of what it could do. So cloud functions, they sort of give you that extra power that you might need. There is slight limitations on the real-time database. For instance, I've used it to do a more in-depth query to the database. Sometimes you might want to do a particular bit of logic to find a certain record in the database, and the API just doesn't support those filters you want to implement. So being able to do an API call within Firebase, the Firebase function itself can have full administration rights, it can have full access to the database, it can have access to the other features inside Firebase as well, and bring it together for you. And again, like I said, it can be written in JavaScript or TypeScript. I generally use TypeScript because it's nicer. There's an extra bit of nice layer over the top. So why? Why would we use it? So like I said, we can notify users when something happens. So there's a change in the database, we run a bit of script, and we can send a push notification out to all our users who are using our app, or an SMS, or something like that. An example here, we're going to use database sanitation. So you'll see the example I showed you earlier with the messages in the database. We're going to get a trigger on a new message coming in. We're going to make sure there's no profanity in there from him. And then we're going to rewrite that data to the database with asterisks instead of the swear words. That's just an example of what you can do to the database. You can also you can execute intensive tasks. So say there's some kind of heavy calculation you're going to be doing regularly about the data in the database, or there's something that you wouldn't want to tie up resources on the phone or your browser or whatever. You've got the power of the Google Cloud there to do more intensive things in the function in the cloud. And you can also integrate with third-party services. So, like I say, sending SMSs. You might want to, for instance, access, car registration information, or you've got data on your own server. I have a star there because if you want to access external things using Firebase functions, that is a paid-for feature. So, you can send an email from Gmail for free, but if you want to send an email from, give me an example of an email.
Outlook.com.
Or Apple, something like that, then that's an external thing to Google and you have to pay to access it. Is there any questions at this point about functions?
Can it do, for example, big data related tasks?
Sorry, say again?
Heavy like big data.
Yeah, it can do quite intensive tasks.
There is no restriction on how long time?
There is a restriction on the amount of time that your function can run for. Yeah, there is actually. I don't know what the number off the top of my head is.
Is it seconds, minutes?
I think it's a good number of seconds. It might not be as much as minutes, but it's...
Basically, you've got to pay for it.
Yeah, but if you
can
pay,
do what you like,
if you upgrade and pay $25 a month, then yes, you
So
get...
for example, if our function is very going from the sheet or Amazon, there is a restriction on how long your Lambda function can run, even if you pay for it. So I'm just trying to understand what is cloud function for you.
Yeah, there is a restriction on the amount of time your function can run, but like I say, I can't remember the number off the top of my head. Yeah, there is. So it would have to be quite intensive, short operations. Yeah, there is. I think it's not. I don't think it's as much as a minute.
Yeah.
It's enough to do a search through your entire database, or it's enough to. I don't know a good example of that right now. Any other questions? Okay. So here's an example of the console. What you can see here is, this is the log. So this is sort of the back end of the function. And in TypeScript, you'd write console.log and you put your message in. And this is where it comes out. So this is great for, it's nice and focused, isn't it? I'm glad you can read that. So this is where you can debug from. So during development, or you've got a problem you're trying to fix, this is where you see your output console from your Firebase function. Because obviously it runs in the cloud, it doesn't run on your computer. You can't unfortunately even test it on your computer. It all has to run from the cloud. So this is how you get to your logs. You can do a bit of filtering, you can change the amount of time you want to look at. It's not incredibly powerful, this page, but it obviously is very useful.
So are these completely independent of Google Cloud functions? So Google Cloud has its own concept of Google functions as well, hasn't it? So these completely independently implemented, aren't they?
It's independent, I think, but it's actually ended up being built on the same system.
Yeah.
So Firebase built on that same platform as Cloud.
Do they appear in Google Cloud as well?
Oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, they well could.
So I don't know if you can read it here. 4 lines down the log, it says receive message content. It says, hello, my name's Jules. Next one up, it's in sort of reverse time order, most recent at the top. Says, user is swearing, moderating, and then the message has been changed, and there's a number of asterisks, because this particular library I used for this demonstration app is a bit oversensitive, and I think because hello contains the word hell, it started out. Yeah, it's a shame you can't read that, but this sort of links into the little demonstration I've got after this. So I hope that's useful to you guys. Again, you've got sort of a bit more at the top. You can see some usage information. And the dashboard is really just a list of your functions. It's not as great as it sounds from the word dashboard. So is there any other questions before I move on? I think my next slide. Here you go. So this is a quick overview of sort of the payment tiers. I've just copied and pasted the two here from the Firestore and the functions, just so you can see. There's obviously tons of other features that you can pay for here. So you can see, I mean, for $25 a month, you're actually getting a pretty decent increase. And $25 a month for a business is, nothing. And then if you want to do pay-as-you-go, if you want more resources, then you have that option as well. But generally, I don't think we've had a client who's needed much more than this. And we've done other things, haven't we, with extra instances and things if you need to do more. That's just a bit of information. So, it's the fun bit. This comes to my demonstration. So what I've done here is I've created a quick web app using Ionic, and if you go to that bit.ly link, I chose a bit.ly link because it's a bit easier than our massive web address that goes to our server that I put it on. You should see a screen with a box. You can put some text in. Once you start typing some text in, you'll get a save button. And this is the first part of demonstration that links together the Firestore and the cloud function. So let me just demonstrate. Here you go. So this. So this is the other side of the functions. Here's another quick Ionic app. It's got a bit of at the top again just to make sure you can get it. So what's happening is the web app that you're hopefully using right now, I'm not just Tom over there very what it's doing, I'll show you the code again in a minute. It's essentially all you're doing when you press the save, it's just adding a message document to the database. And then, because people are a little bit unsure, there's a cloud function, and that triggers off that message object. And what that does is that looks at the message, says, are there any swearing in there? Yes or no? And fixes it if it has got swearing. And obviously, it's not. So what you can see here, I hope in this demonstration, is that you will see the bad word for a few milliseconds, and then you'll see the Firebase function trigger and fix it.
So, I mean, don't go crazy, there are ladies in the room, but what you've got so far is, it doesn't like balls. It's quite tame, doesn't it? What else did we find earlier? It doesn't like hello. It doesn't like hello. Okay, well, I can put this up after talk, but I feel we need to perhaps move forward. Okay, so hopefully that's what you saw. I hope that worked, and my programming was very good. So what to do? So I've kind of done over this before. The message comes in from the web app that you've got in your browser in front of you, goes into the database, it's read from the database by the Firebase functions, it's sanitized by the function, and the function was triggered, again I'll show you the code, the function was triggered on this message object, it's sanitized and put back into the database. And then the bit that's missing from here is the other web app, which is on the laptop, which is monitoring those messages and updating it into its web page. So, I apologise if I shouldn't be over any of your heads. You should all be good programmers. But this is our Ionic app, so this is in TypeScript as well. You see right at the top, in construct, we're getting a reference to the Firestore database. And then when you click the nice blue save button, we run this function. And it looks quite complicated, but most of the code actually is putting the alert on the screen to tell it was successful. So we say it's loading, just to show the spin on the button, the UI feedback. And then all we do is just say database.collection messages. So if you remember I showed you the overview of the database, you have that messages collection. And we're going to add a document just using a JSON object with a message that just contains some text. And then you just have a then callback and a catch callback. The then says it is fired successful and the catch was fired if there was an error. It's fairly simple. It's just one line of code to put it in the database. Is there any questions about that? Good. So here we have the middle part, the function, the Firebase function. You see at the top we're bringing in the bad words filter. I got that from the Google Git repository. It's on the Firebase example code. It's a bit detailed and not fantastic. I did have some problems with it, typical Google, but very well documented. It's all very well documented, it's great. So here we can see we're creating a function here in the Firestore, and we're looking at document messages, and then the bit in the very simple says message ID, that gives us a variable called message ID that we can get the sort of primary key if you want from the document ID, if we wanted to use the code. I haven't used it into the code, but you can if you want to record it somewhere. So then we get a reference to the message from the snapshot. We check if we haven't already sanitized it, because what we're going to do down here is we're going to add the fact that we've sanitized it already, just in case this gets fired on an update. If this message gets updated, we don't want to sanitize it again, we don't want to waste runtime. So we saw in the log earlier, remember I showed you the Firebase function log, we've got retrieve message and show message, then it sanitizes it for us, moderates it, we log the new moderated message, and then we put it back in the database. Again, very simple. We're just going to, the object contains a reference to the database, and we're just going to update. So we're going to put the moderated message back in, mark it, we sanitize it, and show that we did or didn't have to moderate it, or didn't have to change the text. I hope that's fair clear. Any questions? So this is just a quick note. If nobody's used Firebase functions before, this is PowerShell on Windows, like command prompt. So this is how you would upload a function. Basically, you deploy the function, and it gives you a bit of feedback into the process and tells you it's complete. The reason I want to show you this is because if this was a HTTP request, what you get at the bottom of that stream of data is the URL to access it. So just to show you that it gives you some pretty information there. And then you see it says deployed completed. So here's the code that I showed you was running on my computer that showed you the messages. Put that HTML at the top there. Again, this is Ionic code. So we're going to, for every message in the list of messages, we're just going to put it on the screen in a list. That's basically what that HTML means.
And then here we're going to bring in the libraries for Firebase. The interface you see at the top, this is an object that the Firebase API is going to parse our message from the database into an object so that we can use that object more easily than, say, you know, a nondescript sort of object from their API somewhere. You can actually have a nice interface there to be able to use, and that's what the HTML uses. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a reference to the collection. That's the messages collection. And then the bit of code that does all the updating and all the really hard work is this collection.value changing, and that fires. Whenever there's a change in the database or our messages collection, that will run and it will update our messages variable. It's even simpler than how the old version used to work. And that's again, it's only like 2 lines of code, and you're synchronizing data from the database across your app. Is any other questions? Yeah.
Just to see if I got it right. So the one bit which is Ionic that runs, that's what I see when I go to the bit.ly URL. The one that shows PowerShell and you deploy it, that's basically your front end that shows all the messages, right? And the whole thing is glued together via Firebase database in the background, and it does a sanitization of the text string before it actually shows up at your end. Well,
no, this part of the app, which is the one that showed, so this is that's the code for this.
Yeah.
So it shows up in the list before the Firebase function is triggered. So it's already in the database. Right. This gets triggered, so that line of code which was looking for value changes, that gets triggered because there's a new piece of data in the database.
Yeah, so that's the bit that runs in the cloud directly, but...
No, that bit running in the browser here.
Oh, right, okay, right.
So I can run through that quickly again just to make it a little bit clearer.
So then so you do the sanitization locally, then...
And the sanitization's in the cloud.
So this bit here we can see, this code which is uploading, this is what you were running in your browser just now. So that's your code running in the browser on your computer. This is the Firebase function doing the sanitation, and this is running in the cloud.
This is running in the cloud, okay.
Okay, so this is triggered when a new message comes in to the message collection.
So this runs basically next to your database in the cloud?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then that's us uploading the Firebase function, and then this code is what's running our web app here. And that has a watch on the database, and every time there is a change, so that value change function, every time there is a change in the database, this web app is told, hey, there's a new set of data, and it adds it to our list.
But what did you deploy with PowerShell then? What was that?
That was the Firebase function.
You're
writing it.
Right, so you're writing it and deploying it rather than writing it on the web front and then copy, cut, and paste code.
Correct.
Right,
Yes.
Sorry, that was a bit...
Sorry. Yeah.
Imagine that once you sort of get a big database and you get geo. Is there a geo version of Firebase? Is it you sort of have the same data existing in sort of North America and Europe?
Yeah, you can control the regioning in this. So you could, you'd have to do a bit of, it doesn't support it very well, but if you had an app, it on a mobile phone, it knows which region it's in by your device. So it could look at a particular database and you could have a number of instances in a different region. So you can tell it, I'm in the UK, I'm in North America, and you can have a database that only is available in those areas. What are we doing? No, that's not going to work. Sorry. Ionic doesn't allow that.
I was just going to ask about the sort of consistency sort of levels. So when you insert that data, when you modify that data, obviously you've got no control on the input stuff and how it's made. So do you have any? Have you seen any consistency issues where you've got data for something and it takes a while for the client to get that update?
There is, obviously depending on the scale of it, there is a few seconds of delay.
Yeah.
we've seen, haven't we?
Well, we saw it sort of changing.
Yeah, so there can be a few seconds, and you know, it's not a perfect system. It is, Firestore is still in beta,
Yeah.
like most Google Firebase products are. So there is a bit of latency, yeah, but luckily Firestore, it sort of has the automatic ability to make those in the right timeline, so the latest information is in the database.
But in your development experience, you haven't seen any issues with consistency, there's no documents and such, yeah.
No, not.
That's good enough for me.
No, we've never had that much latency in the system. So, does anybody have any other questions? So that concludes my talk. I hope I've covered it in enough detail to explain what it is and answer any questions you might have. Obviously, if you have any other questions, you can get us on Twitter @AppsInTheSky. You know, we'll respond to tweets and whatever. You can email us, go to our website. But yeah, I use both of these things almost every day at work, and for a free platform, you know, it works so well, and it's so powerful, so expandable, and it is reliable. You do occasionally get some outages, but you will with everything when you use Google after all. So, okay, so thank you everyone. Thank you for